it only serves to make me more determined to achieve my final goal. And I will come back even stronger, not a novice any longer, for you've deepened the conviction of my soul. Oh yes, I am wise, but it's wisdom born of pain. Yes, I paid the price, but look how much I've gained. If I have to, I can do anything. I am strong, I am invincible, I am woman. I am woman, watch me grow, see me standing toe to toe as I spread my loving arms across the land. But I am still an embryo with a long, long way to go until I make my brother understand. Oh yes, I am wise, but it's wisdom born of pain. Yes, I paid the price, but look how much I've gained. If I have to, I can face anything. I am strong, I am invincible, I am but I am still an embryo with a long, long way to go until I make my brother understand. Oh yes, I am wise, but it's wisdom born of pain. Yes, I paid the price, but look how much I've gained. If I have to, I can face anything. I am strong, I am invincible, I am
Marlene, can you hear me? Okay. So should I go ahead and get started? Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. This is my first time doing a webinar, so I have to get myself acclimated. But I want to welcome you all to NCJW San Antonio's panel discussion with our female clergy on breaking the glass ceiling. I'm Lori Stockstill, president of NCJW San Antonio, and I'm so glad to see that there are so many of you who have joined us here tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing our clergy talk to us tonight about their experiences establishing themselves in a profession that was formerly male-dominated. But I just want to tell you a couple quick things about NCJW. We've been super busy the last few months doing everything we can to get out the vote for this election. I think that all of us who participated in these activities walked away feeling like we really did a good thing. We're going to continue. I just want you to know that it doesn't end with the election. We will be continuing to advocate for those issues that impact the well-being of women, children, and families throughout the year. Also, our community outreach team has come up with several ways to reach out to our community this year in this new environment. In August, we had a diaper drive-by, which benefited the Center for Refugee Services. We collected enough diapers to take care of their clients' needs for 3 months. Our next event to support the center is scheduled for November 18th, but this time we're going to be collecting sanitary napkins. Please come by the JCC parking lot, the one across from the HEB, on November 18th between 10 and 12 to drop off your items. If you can't make it that day, please feel free to, there is a button on our website where you can donate to this, and we will go out and we'll purchase the items for you. Just a couple more quick things. We have our Trashy Book Club is coming up next Monday, November 9th, and the book is Little Fires Everywhere. And as I always tell you, please come whether or not you've read the book, at least for the beginning, which is basically our general meeting. And then the last item I wanted to tell you about is an event in November. It's called What's in Your Closet, where we're going to talk about the little hidden treasures in your closet. And Debbie Kempler is going to be our facilitator for that. So that's all that I have. I want to introduce to you our moderator and our question and answer coordinator. Marlene Eichelbaum will be our moderator, and Wendy Geisler, raise your hand, Wendy. Wendy is going to manage the Q&A. If you have a question for the rabbis or the Cantor, please put them in the Q&A and we will make sure that they are answered. So with that, I will turn it over to Marlene Eichelbaum. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say that Marlene and Wendy are co-chairs of our programming committee. So you guys have done a great job this year. So Marlene, I turn it over to you.
Marlene, you're muted.
Marlene, you'll need to unmute.
Happens all the time. Trust us.
Okay, sorry about that. Hello, everyone. I'd also like to welcome you. So in honor of our recently departed Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg of blessed memory, we have put together a panel of 3 rabbis and a cantor who all happen to be female. As you know, Justice Ginsburg fought tirelessly for women's rights. So our topic for tonight, as Lori mentioned, is how these women rabbis and Cantor got into what was predominantly a male-dominated field and the challenges they may have faced being a woman. So a few housekeeping things before we begin. We have some initial questions that the panel will discuss. And then if you have additional questions, you can go ahead and put those in the Q&A link as you think of them. And at the end of our discussion, my co-chair, Wendy Geisler, will be monitoring that box and she will ask the panel those questions as time permits. In the meantime, please keep yourselves mute so that the panel's not disturbed. I also want to thank Joel Swedloff for managing all the technical aspects of this webinar. If you have any technical questions or issues, you can direct those to Joel. If you'll put those in the chat box, then he can go ahead and answer them as those come up. If you can't get into the chat for some reason, Joel's email is joel@beth-elsa.org, and you can direct a question to him that way. So let me first introduce our panel. We're going to start with Rabbi Mara Nathan from Temple Beth-El. We have Rabbi Sharon Cohen from Congregation Agudas Achim, Rabbi Marina Yergin from Temple Beth-El, and Cantor Julie Berlin from Temple Beth-El. So let's get started. Our first question is, why did you become or choose to become a rabbi or a cantor in this particular arena, which we said was so male dominated, especially at one time in the past? We'll start with Rabbi Nathan.
Sure. Wow. Okay. Spotlighted. Awesome. I think growing up, I didn't have any women who were role models for me as rabbis. There were women who were rabbis, but they weren't around as much. But I think by the time I was finishing college and thinking about what the next part of my life would be like, there were many more women who were entering the rabbinate. And I actually had a college classmate, actually a sorority sister, who was a year ahead of me, who had made the choice to apply to Hebrew Union College. So that was the first time I think that I started to even consider that it was a path that was even possible for me. But I saw a lot of myself and really related to my friend Andrea and her decision to apply to HEC and then to go on to rabbinical school. And she's actually the Hillel director at the University of Wisconsin now. That was the thing that propelled me. I don't think I was concerned about the fact that it was a male field and that I wouldn't be accepted. I was more, hadn't seen other women to model being a rabbi in a way that it seemed like something that I would even consider. And then when I applied to rabbinical school and was accepted and started, it turned out that my class was the first class at Hebrew Union College that was half women and half men. So from the beginning of my studies in Jerusalem, we were equal, so to speak, in terms of the gender makeup of our class.
Okay, thank you. Rabbi Cohen, would you like to address that same question more from the conservative viewpoint?
Sure. Yeah, in growing up, I grew up in a non-egalitarian conservative congregation. So as a young woman getting ready for a young girl getting ready for bat mitzvah, I had a Friday evening bat mitzvah where I had nothing to do specifically on the bima. I can even probably go back to my religious school education with that, where we were charged with making prayer shawls, with making a talit. And when I said, well, but women don't wear them here, the teacher said, well, you all who are girls, you can make them for your brothers or your fathers. And I think that right there was a seed for me. I never finished the project until later in my education as a young adult, actually. And so that never sat right with me. When my family moved to Tennessee, which was a very different community than I grew up in Florida, in South Florida, which was a very busy Jewish active community with a lot of large Jewish population. I moved to a small population in Chattanooga, and there the congregation had only a few years before become fully egalitarian, with a young rabbi who had kind of paved the way. And I, having had that past experience of kind of being excluded, I was suddenly very included. And I kind of quickly found a home there, and at the urging of the rabbi and his wife and the community there, I became very involved and learned to read Torah, do the kind of skills that I had always wanted to do. And I really kind of became a student, if you will, or he became a mentor for me. So by the time I was ready to go to college, I had already had that, I think that influence to go towards the rabbinate. And like Rabbi Nathan, I also had influences in college. My roommate ended up being, we both went to JTS together, Conservative Rabbis, or AJU and JTS, was our route. And so it wasn't because I had seen any women rabbis around me, I had not, but it was that I think I had experiences that opened up the profession and the beauty of Judaism and the profession of a rabbi for me, that I was able to go that path and wanted to.
Okay, well, thank you. So our next question is along the same lines. Cantor Berlin, I'll direct that to you first. Can you tell us in particular the differences, say that when you were entering cantorial school, and then I'm going to ask Rabbi Yergin to tell us what it was like when she entered. Not saying that you're old, but you are a little bit older than Rabbi Yergin.
I think I've been ordained, I don't know about Rabbi Cohen, but of the three of us at Temple, I've been ordained the longest. So I would say that when I entered cantorial school, my class was the largest cantorial class until then at 19. And we also were the first class, like Rabbi Nathan, different year though, the first cantorial class to be pretty much half women and half men. So I don't know that and actually prior to that, most of the classes were smaller and mostly male. The average class size was 5 to 7 or 8 students, and mostly male. And then after I was ordained, the majority of the classes were more females than males, and also smaller. So
Okay.
that continues.
So Rabbi Yergin, what was your experience?
So
when you
mine
went-
is boring. It was not odd to have women be rabbis. My male rabbi, when I was becoming a bat mitzvah, sorry, hold on. Okay, have fun. My rabbi, when I was becoming a bat mitzvah, suggested that I become a rabbi, and that was pretty much it. My family was like, yeah. So since I was 12, I've been on this path. And when I got into HUC, our class for our year in Israel was 60-40, 60% female, 40% male. And that was with rabbinic, cantorial, and education students. And so it just was. It wasn't odd. You know, we still had different experiences than some of our male classmates, which I think some of that has to do with campuses of HUC, but it wasn't weird to be, or unique or different to be a female rabbi. What was unique is that it was me.
Okay. Well, I guess it was different because when my husband was in law school, it was probably 95% men and maybe 1 or 2 women, but that was about 60 years ago. So times have changed.
I was
Okay.
ordained 6 years ago, so a little different.
Right. So our next question is, how do you juggle being a rabbi and cantor and the demands that it puts on you? And how do you juggle your family life? And I think we'll continue with Rabbi Yergin because I think she can speak to that very well.
You think because Trevor just came in? Yeah, so it's an interesting work-life balance. And I think my answer, if you had asked me in February, would have been very different than it is now, before the pandemic. So Trevor has been home with me since I've been working from home, so since March, and he's 2.5. And so that has made it very, very interesting for a number of reasons, as you can imagine. But I think the work-life balance is very difficult, and trying to show how you can be a mother and a parent at the same time, and a spouse, all of those things, it shows even from the Bima. So when Dave and I met, I was in rabbinic school, so he kind of knew what he was getting himself into. And we talked about when we had a family that we wanted them to be a part of the synagogue. So it is very obvious. Trevor comes almost every Shabbat service as much as I can. I want him there and want him to feel comfortable. Obviously, things have looked a little different, although he has joined on Zoom just as he did tonight. So it's hard. It's a really hard balance, but I think that it also shows him, and being not just having a mother who's a female, but being a part of a congregation where the entire clergy team is female. For him, it might even be weird that there's a male rabbi. And so that kind of culture is really exciting to me, that I get to bring him and our future son up in that kind of structure and community.
Okay. Cantor Berlin, would you like to address that same question now that you're an empty nester, I think?
I am. It's odd. So yeah, I've gone, the whole span of my children at different ages. And when I first started, my children were young, and Alan and I were both on the Bima every single week. And at every synagogue event, it was a smaller congregation, so we literally were part of every single thing, and it was hard. I had a nice chart for babysitters, and when they canceled last minute, my kids sometimes at ages 4, 8, and 9 might have been sitting in the front row of the congregation all by themselves, with me in front giving them the evil eye. So I've gone from that, and the challenge then when they were younger was that we never got to sit with them in services. We never got to sit with them for holiday services, and our holiday celebrations might have been postponed or at different times because we were providing the holiday or the Shabbat for everybody else. So it doesn't leave a lot of time for clergy to have their own celebrations, at least at the same time. And now my kids are older, and it's hard when you want to do your best at being a cantor, and I want to do my best at being a mom and a wife. And it's really hard to do your best at everything all the time. So now they're older. I've missed concerts. I've missed, back to school night. But the most important thing, I think, is that Alan and I try to be there when our kids need us we do make the majority of concerts and that kind of thing, including driving to UT for Daniel's band concerts when he was there. And I think the important thing is that we try to make sure that they know that everything that they do is important to us and that we want to be a part of that, and that and they understood that what we do at Temple is important also. And it's a lot of tag teaming and juggling, but it's worth it. I enjoy working and being a part of the congregation, and I enjoy being a mom. So.
Thank you. Okay, so my next question is, and I'm going to direct it to Rabbi Cohen. We would like to know if you've met any resistance because you're a woman from other members of the clergy, both Jewish and non-Jewish, or congregants. I know you haven't been here a long time, but you've been a rabbi for a while now, and so you can draw upon your previous experiences too. But tell us what resistance you might have come against.
I think that in many ways I've been probably pretty lucky. I think my 3 years as an assistant coming out of school, and then my years in Kentucky were pretty smooth, I think, in terms of that. I didn't have a lot of resistance. I will tell you that when I first arrived in Kentucky, I was the first female rabbi of the congregation in terms of leading that congregation, or in the community as well, not just in the congregation itself. And so there was expectation that some of the old timers would be resistant and, well, how do you feel about a woman rabbi, et cetera. I remember that the oldest member of the congregation, who lived to be about 104, told everybody, I don't pray through my rabbi as long as she knows her stuff and does her thing. And why should I have a problem with it? And I always took his words to heart. And I think that it didn't take long, since the congregation was egalitarian already. Women were leaders, lay leaders in the community, that it didn't take long for the congregation to accept me. And I didn't have to prove myself as a woman, but as a rabbi in general, which anyone would have had to do. Just as a side, I think it's interesting because 20 years later, I'm here and I've heard more issues about being a female rabbi, despite the fact that I have 3 colleagues across town who have paved the way in this community. I think, just in terms of the conservative movement and just where Agudas has been historically, that it certainly is more novel. There have been a woman rabbi, but not necessarily as the senior here. But I will tell you, it's interesting in terms of the non-Jewish community. I'm going to hold up very quickly a newspaper that I had. This was the spread that I got in Lexington when I first arrived. They, said, hey, we have a rabbi. So here I have someone had made this for me, 2-page spread about how amazing and look, a woman. And they interviewed the man I was talking about, who had, said, well, it'll be okay. I'm sure as long as she's a good rabbi, she'll be okay as a woman. It's all right. That was what I got 20 years ago. Here, this is what I got. It's one-sided. And I show it visually to show that I think, especially in the non-Jewish community, that it's no longer novel. I think we have so many people in various, not just in the Jewish community, obviously, for my colleagues here, but those in the non-Jewish community with pastors and reverends all over that are being Jewish, that are being leaders, female leaders and clergy in various churches and places around the city in particular, that, my arrival is not a big deal. So I think we've made the big time that my arrival is not a big deal. I'm happy for that.
That's great. I'd like to also direct that same question to Rabbi Nathan.
Sure. I agree with Rabbi Cohen. I feel like throughout my career, my being a woman hasn't really been a piece to reckon with in a big sense. There definitely have been lots of microaggressions. Sometimes you just ignore them and don't even notice them. Other times they need to be called out. Often that's, that'll be with individuals, older people sometimes, but not just older people. I think interestingly, also, we sometimes find that there are other women who aren't as supportive of us in our public positions. And that initially was a bit of a surprise. I think for some women who have made different choices in their life, when they see a woman or women who are working not just full-time professionally, but are public figures who are juggling, as Rabbi Yergin and Cantor talked about, their family and their professional life. There's either resentment or jealousy. I think it's not always conscious, but in some ways, some of the aggressions that I've experienced that have been the most surprising have been from women, not necessarily here in San Antonio per se, but just throughout my career. So, but in taking this position, I certainly had colleagues out there who said, you're not going to get that job because you're a woman, right? They're going to let you be a finalist. And I've seen it happen many times before, but that wasn't how it happened. So I like to believe that I was definitely not chosen because I was a woman, but just because the search committee felt like I was the right rabbi for Temple Beth-El. And most of my dealings, not only in the Jewish community, but also throughout the San Antonio community and the national community. That's mostly my experience.
Very good. Okay, so our next question is, what has been your most rewarding experience being a rabbi or a cantor? And we'll go ahead and let you continue, Rabbi Nathan. You're on mute.
I tried to unmute, but my mouse failed me. And Marina is spotlighted, not me. I think, no? Oh, I get to see your face, Marina. That's very exciting.
It's because I just told you you were muted.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Well, now you are.
Love Zoom. So there are so many meaningful experiences that I imagine it's pretty hard to just pick one, but I think the hardest part of this whole pandemic is not being able to be with people and the opportunity to spend time with people, either socially, and casually, before, after services or a community event, or being with them at their moments of joy, like a wedding or a baby naming or a bris, or to be with them to help them through a sad time during a funeral. Those are the most meaningful parts for me of being a rabbi, is having those personal connections with folks. And we're still able to do it, of course, but it's just not the same as not being face-to-face in person. So to me, that's the most valuable part of what I do as a rabbi, and I find it the most meaningful. And admittedly, it's the part that's been one of the most challenging parts of the COVID pandemic, and needing to be away from each other, socially distanced, or even when we are together, to have to wear that mask, to not be able to read each other's facial expressions, give each other a hug or a kiss. I mean, that's the part I love the best. So it's also the part I miss the most.
Cantor Berlin, what is your most rewarding experience as a cantor?
I would have to agree with Rabbi Nathan in that being part of people's lives, I think, is the most rewarding. We spend time with people when they're ill in the hospital, or when they've lost a loved one, or even being a part of their simchas, their joys. And now that I've been at Temple for a while, I've been able to be a part of multiple events in people's lives, and that's, you feel like you follow the path, and you're really part of it when you do. I was at a baby naming and a bar mitzvah, or a bar mitzvah and a wedding, and it's just that's my most rewarding part of being a Cantor.
Okay. Rabbi Yergin, address the same question.
So I agree with everything that's been said, but I think that the thing for me that has been so unique for my other colleagues, not here on the screen, but in other locations across the country, is that I have been able to work with over 70 people on their Jewish journeys as they have become Jews by choice in the 5.5 years that I've been here. And it is emotional each and every time they come out of the mikveh and we get to have a conversation that says that this is it, you've worked for this and this is it. And so for me, that has been so meaningful, and to be able to be with all of those people on the journey, you know, each of them I work with for an entire year and get to know them really well, and then come and see them at different synagogue functions, things like that. That has been a really special and unique experience. A lot of other congregations across the countries and communities do not have that robust of a conversion program. And so to be able to work with that many people and go through this special time with them is incredible.
Very good. And Rabbi Cohen, we'd also like you to address the same question. What's been your most rewarding experience as a rabbi?
I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I would definitely echo Rabbi Nathan and Cantor Berlin in particular. I think those life cycle moments, those moments of connection, whether it's walking somebody through after a death, you know, or even again, illness for me. I've done a lot of that with pastoral care in my experience. I think those are the most rewarding experiences when you know you've made a difference. And you've really connected with people on not just the Jewish level, but on the basic human level as well. And as they both mentioned, as Rabbi Nathan in particular mentioned, COVID is really made that very, very challenging. And so looking for those rewarding experiences, those moments of being able to connect in a different way has been quite a challenge the last number of months. But I would say that being able to walk with people during the most difficult times of their lives can in the end be, I think, one of the most rewarding things that I've done as a rabbi.
Very good, thank you. Okay, our next question is, what is your favorite Jewish holiday and why? And I'll let you go ahead and continue, Rabbi Cohen.
My most favorite Jewish holiday, probably, I've always loved Passover. I you know, for the food, the traditions of, you know, family that from memories from being a kid, from family, from, you know, nothing better than matzah ball soup and that first crack of matzah you eat. But I love the education piece of that holiday in particular. It's just such a dynamic experience. Now that I have little guys, little kids as well in my house, I look at it differently as a parent now than I did just as a rabbi in the congregation and facilitating the Seder experience for others. And I think it's such a rich holiday for us, again, educationally and spiritually for us. So I think I would have to definitely say Passover is far and above my most meaningful. I'll also just add that I think as a rabbi, being able to craft high holiday services, the high holy days, and trying to make meaningful experiences for people, it ends up being a lot of work, but it also brings that sense of joy in the end for that accomplishment when we know we've been able to touch people on a very, you know, profound spiritual level. So I would add that in there as professionally and personally, again, would be probably Passover.
Okay, Rabbi Nathan, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Rabbi Cohen stole my answer. But I'm gonna I'll highlight something different, which is growing up in my house as a child, Passover was my father's favorite holiday. It still is his favorite holiday. And he would create his own Haggadah with some friends, and that's a tradition that we've carried on in our family too. But I also love to cook and bake, and I don't have a lot of time to cook and bake in my life. And so particularly because at least for First Night at Temple, that is an at-home holiday. I really love the opportunity to make a lot of the dishes that I grew up with. I get to use my great grandma Minnie's kugel pans to make my matzo farfel kugel. I'm the only one in my family that likes matzo farfel kugel, but I make it every year. Back home in New York, there are other people who like matzo farfel kugel. I don't care, they're not here, I'm making it. And except for this year, we also love to invite family and friends to join us, and really like to have a big Seder. So of course, when our kids were really little, Rabbi Cohen, like yours are, we really worked on like a mini Seder, trying to boil it all down to keep everyone. Oh, Lori, I'm so glad you like matzo farfel kugel. I'm going to make you some next year. But now that my children are older, we're able to now start to move into a more grown-up Seder. There was a pretty long time in our family that there were no small children, you know, from the time that my siblings and I were in our teens, really into our late 20s, early 30s. So we had a lot of time to have very adult Seders, and then they really kind of took a pause, and now we're getting back to more academic Seders, and that's really fun too. I'm happy to post my matzo farfel kugel recipe. I'll have to type it up though, because it's just handwritten. I asked my mom what it was one year, and I quickly wrote it down while we were on the phone. But if I can do it, anyone can do it. It's like any good Ashkenazi recipe. It's got like 4 ingredients and and some oil. So
Sounds yummy.
The matzah, because it's Passover.
it's got matzo farfel.
There you go.
Okay, Rabbi Yergin, tell us your favorite Jewish holiday.
So this question is so hard for me. I don't know that I necessarily have one. I like them. I don't want to say like I like them all, but I like them for different reasons. I think that one of the ones that I find the most special, and I definitely don't do in my own personal practice, and it's not something that we do at Temple all that often, is Havdalah. And some of you may know this, but I am not a fan of fire. But during the pandemic, I've figured it out. I have lit Shabbat candles and Havdalah candles on Zoom. So I figured it out a little bit, but I love the symbolism that Havdalah brings and all of the meaning and being able to do it. And I know it's a short thing and it happens every week, but it feels so special and really separates that time and reminds me to start the week over, especially because Shabbat, I'm working. And so Havdalah gives me that time to recognize in a different space that, okay, I had this time, now we're starting a new week. So I love the symbolism of Havdalah.
Very good. And Cantor Berlin, would you tell us your favorite Jewish holiday?
Yes, so I also love Passover, and when I was growing up, we spent it with a different branch of the family than I normally saw on a weekly basis, so I enjoyed that. And my family makes everything from scratch, always, every holiday, everything. So I didn't realize how special that was until I had been to other people's homes. But a couple of years ago, and I also enjoy baking and cooking, and I realized that since my sister is a vegetarian, she will never make the gefilte fish from scratch or the chopped liver from scratch. So a few years ago, I think it fell on a Shabbat, so I was actually able to go home, and I went home a few days early to spend it with my mom, help her prepare the Seder, and I made gefilte fish from scratch with her, which I'm not sure I'll ever do it again, but I know how. And I also don't eat gefilte fish, so I don't have a reason to make it. But I can. I just felt like, and we also made chopped liver. I peeled 5 million eggs and carrots that week. And by the way, my mom saves the eggshells, but you have to peel out that little thingy film or whatever in the inside. She saves them so that she can crinkle them up in the garden to keep the slugs from going up her stuff. So not only did I peel the eggs, but I saved all of the eggshells. And well, you know, I won't be doing that, but my mom does. Anyways, I enjoyed spending that time with my mom again, and learning how to make some family recipes that at least I know how to make and can carry them on in the future, you know, for future generations. So that's special for me.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over to Wendy now, who's going to ask the questions in the Q&A. If you have questions, please be sure and put them in the Q&A section so that Wendy can go through them and present them to the panel. Thank you again to our panel. Thank you to Joel for handling all this, and I'm going to turn it over to Wendy now.
Okay, stay tuned, Marlene, in case I have a question for you. Hello, everyone. It's been absolutely brilliant listening to your responses. I'm sure that we're all enthralled, and I think, oh, the Q&A questions are just starting to come in now. So I'll start with the first one while people have time to type up a few. One question that came in is, how do you all feel while traveling to Israel as a female rabbi? Are there limitations that you're keenly aware of? Anyone can answer, all of you, however.
I'll chime in. My Israel year, I felt it was very challenging for me, especially conservative movement, Masorti movement there at that point was really not very egalitarian. I felt my year there was definitely a challenge. Finding a shul that I felt like I could be a part of. Ended up being one that was not actually a conservative synagogue, not Masorti at that point. And so I did find it a challenge. I remember going to one congregation that was conservative, and I wanted to put on my talit like I would normally do, and my kippah, and look around, and there's not one woman doing that at all. And it did kind of frame my experience in Israel at that point. Again, this was early 90s. So things have changed a great deal, thankfully, but it was difficult. So in the times that I've subsequently been back, I would say that I've probably felt more comfortable in my own skin. So I wasn't afraid to do, put on the kippah or whatever it is I might be doing. But at the same time, I did feel a sense of, being inhibited a bit about who I was and what I did. And I think that that's just the nature of being there, at least for me. I love being in Israel, but I know that it's kind of a challenge for my identity as a female rabbi in particular.
So
Thank you.
I had a similar experience. So my year in Israel was 2010 to 2011. And I still felt that way. I had classmates who were, Reform classmates who wore tzitzit or who wore kippot out and were spit on by people as they walked down the street. We're located in Jerusalem. I think it would have been a different story if we had been in a different city. I felt that I couldn't tell anyone why I was there. And that included the people that I was friends with, who knew why I was there and said, I don't think I can hang out with your friends. Like, you is one thing, I know you, but your friends, because I don't think you should be a rabbi, which, ended the friendship, obviously. But it was something that I dealt with, and my parents came to visit, and my dad was horrified when I explained to him, you can't just I know you're proud and you want to brag, but you can't go and tell the cab driver that I'm here to become a rabbi. You can say that I'm studying rabbinics, but he was horrified. He just couldn't understand. And it's a big struggle to feel that if Israel is the Jewish homeland, why can't I be the Jew that I want to be and that I am? And that was something really hard for me to reconcile that year that I lived there. I think I agree with Rabbi Cohen that it's been different as I have been back, and I am more comfortable in who I am, and I'm traveling around a little bit more, and I'm not in Jerusalem the whole time. It feels different.
Marina, do you feel that there was any additional challenge to being Reform? And that goes to all of our Reform clergy attending.
Yes and no. I don't think so, but I think in terms of my personal practice, that made it harder. But I think that it was still hard to feel a place. I also didn't walk around with a sign that said Reform, right? It wasn't like, hello, Reform. So it wasn't something that I talked about, not because I was embarrassed or didn't want to share it. It just wasn't something that came up. I wasn't talking about what I was doing there. Even when I said I was going to Hebrew Union College, most people thought I was an idiot and didn't know, and I was actually talking about Hebrew University. And so I just let it slide. That's fine. Let's just say it's Hebrew University and that's why I'm there, and I don't have to get into it. It just didn't seem worth it. So I don't think that there was a specific difference being Reform. You know, it was highlighted at some points, but I also did a lot within the Reform community because that's where I was.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else on our panel want to respond to the Israel question? Nope.
No.
Okay.
I mean,
All
I
right.
think it's more you know, there's more similarities. I don't think I had as extreme an experience as either of them had. I think even like here in San Antonio, I just decide when I want to wear my kippah and when I don't. You know, when I'm interested in engaging with people, I've always found in Jerusalem as well that people are more interested. Sometimes it comes off as rude. You know, women aren't supposed to wear a kippah, you know, but usually it's like, why? I've never seen a woman wearing a kippah before. So it's a good opportunity to explain. And the times that if I'm taking a group and, you know, so we're with a tour guide, I mean, clearly I'm the rabbi, but we're also in a kind of a protected zone. If you're there studying, you know, you're either at Hebrew Union College or you're in another location where there are a lot of other progressive rabbis, men and women together. So I think, I'm not so sure I would put a kippah on and get on a bus to go up to Haifa just because, but also my personal practice is I wear a kippah for study and worship and not really when I'm out and about. So yeah.
I liked that. Thank you. Any other input? Julie, did you have something you wanted to say? No. Okay. So we have another question for all of you. Anyone can chime in. How do you all, it's a text and I think adjusted text, and I can't think of the term, but how do y'all, and I know she didn't grow up here, how do y'all reconcile working on Shabbat with it being our day of rest? Is that in your training, in your personal?
Well, there's a great teaching that I sometimes use as an introduction to Vishamru that says that God's business is not considered work, and that the work that is prohibited on Shabbat has to do actually with the different acts that were used to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So they're called the Melachot. So leading worship or being with folks is not really supposed to be considered work technically. I think the decision to be not just a clergy person, but to lead a congregation is a decision to sometimes put your personal practice and your personal observance aside. And Cantor talked about that before a little bit. That's why it's important for us to each take some time off, which we try to give each other so we can be home and have Shabbat with our families. I know like if we're on vacation or visiting family, sometimes we like to go to synagogue and just be in the pews. And I know some congregations have a practice of honoring clergy who are in the congregation, right, by welcoming them and noting them. It's not my personal preference. If I'm at a synagogue, just to be at the synagogue, I'm pretty happy to be anonymous. I can have plenty of note as a rabbi. So, but it's, I think in the decision to be a congregational rabbi, that was just part of the deal.
You all on a nod yes with that one? Okay. Well, we have a couple that are a little bit more about you all rather than even Judaism. Some of the ladies want to know where you grew up, where you each grew up. We'll start with Rabbi Yergin.
I grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, a place called Hoffman Estates.
Thank you. And Rabbi Cohen.
Well, I alluded to it. I guess I grew up till I was 12 in Miami, Florida, and then family moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I grew from teenage years on to college there. Yeah,
you did mention Kentucky, but I didn't put it together that you had lived there prior. Mm-hmm. And Rabbi Nathan, if for those who don't know where you grew up.
what, you can't tell from my accent that
I
I'm from New
can,
York?
but you know, to no one is to love oneself. You know.
Exactly. I grew up on Long Island, which are some of the suburbs of Manhattan, and then lived in Westchester before I came here,
Yes,
which is a northern suburb of New York City.
yeah,
So.
upstate already, right?
Oh no.
Yeah. No.
Westchester would not say that. So. Yeah.
And Cantor, Berlin.
And I also grew up in Chicago, but in the south suburbs. I grew up in Flossmoor.
Okay, thank you. I don't know where that is, but thank you. We have a question for you, Cantor, Berlin. Would you please share your gefilte fish recipe?
I would.
I mean, you don't have to do it tonight.
I don't actually know it. I made a family cookbook a few years ago, which it is in.
Oh, the one we talked about.
So I could look there. Whoever wants to know, if you email me, I'm happy to share it.
Okay, we heard it. We all heard that. So I'm reading them as they come in now. Okay, how do you arrange all the help you need or needed in the past to be rabbi, mom, and wife? I couldn't have done what I did as a professional without a lot of help, so I'm very sympathetic, but it's a challenge that I don't think most male rabbis face. But I'm bummed. I think that could be just a nod of agreement, probably. You have to have a supportive other half, right?
You have to have a very supportive partner. Everyone makes their own decisions how they handle childcare. Some people are fortunate enough to have parents nearby. I know that for me, when my children were small, we just threw a lot of money at it, to be honest. We had a full-time full-time childcare up until 2 years ago. So even with that, it's like a nonstop balancing act, but having a partner that is supportive and believes in what you do and is proud of who you are and what you do for the community is really essential.
Wonderful. Thank you. I totally agree. I think we all would. I have no more that really, well, I have a comment to Cantor Berlin that Flora Garb wants you to know that her husband grew up in Park Forest. So you're Landsman. So is there any other, and Marlene, why don't you come back on at this point? Are there any other topics besides the questions that were given to you that you would like to address? Any thoughts that you'd had? Or Marlene, all yours.
Okay. Well, I think that it's been a really interesting and enjoyable panel. I thank all the rabbis in Cantor, Berlin for participating. We had a wonderful response to this event, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. And I think we can go ahead and conclude. That's it. I don't know what else we need to do to log off. So
Joel will turn it off. But thank you all for the opportunity to share.
Thank
It was
you very
really
much for
lovely.
coming.
Thank you all so very much. And thanks everybody for their questions too.
yes.